What?
Were you wounded in the war?
Huh?
What is that?
What?
What is it?
It's my belly button. Everybody has one. Oh. Oh. You remember when you went undercover in that belly dancers club and you had to wear that little outfit? Well, the censors wouldn't allow me to, you see, you can't show a lady's belly button in the papers, so I had to erase it.
If you think I'm coming back to the comics to be drawn by a pervert, you are nuts. Get out. I won't have it. Get out!
Hello and welcome to Comic Book Movie Oblivion, the podcast about feature films based on comic books and comic strips that people have stopped talking about. We are your hosts, Jordan and Kumar, that's me.
And me.
And this week we are talking about Brenda Starr Reporter, or Brenda Starr, the movie, the plain old movie. We'll discuss what year came out later in the show. Okay, it's time for Pause the Podcast.
Well, I, for myself, would like to pause the podcast and just announce to everybody how much I love Dune.
That's a real live bell.
That's a real bell. We're coming up in the world. The podcast is receiving gifts now.
Yeah.
We've received our very first gift.
Yeah.
It's a real life bell for us to ring when we mention our various...
Yes. And we used to use an app and on my phone, which was annoying.
Because you had to leave your phone on.
Yeah.
It couldn't be on silent because we needed to ring the bell.
Yeah.
And attentive listeners will have occasionally heard Kumar receiving messages.
Yeah, and this bell is very loud, like really loud. So there might be some side effects. I don't know. We'll see.
Yeah. We'll see how we go. It's a work in progress, the bell, but very grateful. Very grateful.
Yeah.
Thank you, anonymous listener.
Okay, so Brenda Starr Reporter was a strip that was started in 1940 by the cartoonist Dale Messick. She had initially pitched it as Brenda Starr Bandit.
Right.
And it got shifted around a bit, and I think she got rejected by a bunch of people, including some people that just didn't want to work with a female cartoonist.
Right.
And then somehow finally it got underway in 1940.
That's something of a story. As you said, she'd written this comic, Brenda Starr, about a pirate or a bandit.
Yeah.
She took it to, she took it to the Chicago Tribune.
Okay.
And the editor of the Tribune didn't like female comic artists. Mm-hmm. But his assistant, who was a woman, liked the comic.
Okay.
Suggested that she change it to a reporter, apparently.
Yep.
And convinced the editor to run the comic, to which he agreed.
Yeah.
But he said it would only run on Sundays.
Right.
So it would only be on the Sunday strips.
Yeah.
Until for as long as he was alive.
Yeah.
And then he died like 5 years later, and then it became a daily comic.
In 1947 it got a daily.
Okay, so it's 7 years later,
7
not
years
5.
later, yeah.
Right, so 7 years later he passed away, and then it was then running 7 days a week. Great.
Well, I think it must have been pretty popular, even at the beginning, because she's a feisty reporter. Superman debuted in '38, and I feel like Lois Lane's personality was not really well established.
Sure.
In the early, maybe I'm not quite right about that, but they're kind of similar in personality, except Brenda Starr is more interesting in the comics because she's not obsessed about is Clark Superman and trying to prove it all the time, instead of doing some actual reporting.
And she's the main character of this comic.
Yes, absolutely, yeah.
So you remember Friday Foster? She's sort of kind of a similar character to Friday Foster, except obviously, 30 years earlier. And she's very feminine.
Yes.
So she dresses.
She's fabulous. I would say is the
fabulous.
word.
Brilliant word. She is absolutely fabulous. She's based on Rita Hayworth.
Yeah.
For a lot of modern listeners, Rita Hayworth is the character from the actress from The Shawshank Redemption, the very first poster that Tim Robbins' character.
Yes, in fact, wasn't the title of the book
the novella
Shawshank and
Rita Hayworth and The Shawshank Redemption is the name of the original Stephen King novella. So yes, absolutely gorgeous redhead bombshell based on her, and she wears the most amazing outfits, and she's very curvy.
Yes.
Yes. Apparently, at the insistence of Dale Messick's four younger brothers.
Right. Okay.
Put some curves in.
Okay.
Apparently, this is the story. This is how the story goes.
Okay.
But yes, Messick changed. Her name was Delia.
Okay.
Delia Messick was her real name.
Yeah.
And she took the pen name Dale for obvious reasons,
Right.
because of the difficulty of cracking into a male-dominated industry. And she wasn't the first female comic book artist.
Right.
But she's certainly one of the first, and maybe the first to get really solid kind of mainstream success.
Yeah, but I wonder how long would people not been able to guess that Dale was actually a woman? Because those Sundays, especially the cutouts, so at the bottom of every Sunday page there was a cutout of like outfits, like a dress-up doll, that you could cut out of the paper, paste on some cardboard, and color or whatever.
I would correlation here is not causation. I don't think Delia changing her name to Dale got her this gig.
Right.
What seems to have got her this gig is this urban legend about the female assistant to the editor. But she certainly did deliberately cultivate that ambiguity at the start, because she changed her name to Dale before, when she was trying to break into the industry.
Right.
And I think she did it. I mean, because to create that sense of, to make it easier for her to sell comics.
So I'm looking at there's a feature here from the Chicago Daily Tribune from 1951. This issue we're looking at.
Yes.
Which is all about her, like, and it's got her photo in it and everything.
Yeah.
So
1951, but it refers to her as girl. She's been, you'll notice.
Yeah.
Girls between 8 and 80 all love hats is a line from that.
Yes.
From that particular feature.
Yeah.
And refers to her as a girl, even though she's been writing a best-selling kind of like comic strip for about 10, 11 years at that point.
Yes.
Still.
Yeah.
So it's real, this gender barrier.
Yeah, absolutely. This is also not the first working girl, this genre of working girl comic strips. There was a couple of others, including Ella Cinders and Tilly the Toiler, and some of those have silent movies that we'll be looking at some stage.
Brilliant.
But it was a kind of genre unto itself, so she had a little bit of an in. I don't know if an in is the right word, as we said, they were trying to block her, but it was not unprecedented, let's say.
No, she wasn't the first.
No, and so it actually ran until 2011. Of course, other people took over.
Astonishing. She wrote and drew it for 40 years.
Yes.
1940 to 1980. Then she continued to write it for 2 years, and then it was taken over.
It was drawn by Ramona Fradon.
Right. So,
and she's a real giant. Like she had a great run. She co-created Metamorpho at DC, and she also had a run on Aquaman at DC.
Yes. So she's a big deal, and she took over in 1980.
Yes.
At that point, Dale Messick kept writing it for a couple of years, and then it was taken over by Mary Schmick.
Okay.
Who, and she wrote it for another more than 20 years until it finally wound up in...
Yes, and then June Brigman was drawing it at some stage after Ramona Fradon, and then after she was cancelled, June Brigman went on to Mary Worth, which as far as I know is the most forgettable comic strip there is. It's just like a straight up soap opera that's went for 80 years, but it exists. I think it still exists. Okay, so we read some storylines.
So what's a kind of a typical Brenda Starr kind of story?
Oh, well,
is there a typical Brenda
How can we... So we've got...
Let's just jump right into...
I don't want to say typical because we've got mad scientist face swapping happening here.
Well, this is the best thing ever.
We've got like this leg paint that turns your legs green. That turns out to be a dream. We've got a mystery man driving a future car with a patch over his eye.
Yep.
We've got a murdered fashion model and like a cross-dressing designer.
Yes. A female designer masquerading as a male designer. This is all
in like this one issue that I've got that's like a bunch of continuities, but it's like 60 pages. This is printed by Blackthorn Publishing, probably in the 80s. Oh no, it's actually...
So Brenda Starr, well, she's a reporter. And
yes.
Essentially, her motivation is she's looking for scoops. And
primary motivation. More than people's well-being or anything.
She's looking for scoops, and to a lesser extent,
and her own well-being.
She's and to a lesser extent, she's looking for love. She's a bit of a man-eater.
Well, I think everybody is looking for love from her too. I think all the men around her are constantly
astonishingly attractive. And she attracts male attention, and she's also interested in men as well.
Yes.
Yes. So she's not, although she is chaste. Apparently, she eventually married a man with the eye patch, whose name is Basil
St. John.
Basil St. John.
Yeah.
Correct.
Yeah.
She married him, I think, in the 70s.
Okay.
So long after Dick Tracy married Tess Trueheart, or Joe Palooka married,
right,
or whoever, they all got married,
right,
like long before,
right.
Because Brenda's free-spirited nature is such an important part of her character. That's why this wedding was postponed for so long, and then almost immediately they have a. This is I didn't read these comics. Obviously, this is just reading about the history of the strip.
Yeah.
You know, they almost immediately are on the rocks.
Yes, because you need to have the potential for Brenda to make out with whatever male shows up in the strip in that continuity, in that storyline.
Now, but before we get back to the crazy nature of the strips, I just want to talk a little bit about. We're two cishet males, but I want to talk a little bit about kind of like the feminist reading of the comic. Now, from what we've described so far, it sounds very retrograde, doesn't it? You know.
Well, we haven't even described the most retrograde stuff that's in it.
Right. For example, yeah.
Well, for example, like there's a special Ring in the New Year 1945 strip in which these dudes show up in her house and just basically strip her clothes off, and she's like freaking out. And then this guy takes a picture of her, this guy that assaulted her, and says it's for the troops. And she's like, okay, cool.
Apparently, this happened every year.
Right. So she'd be stripped for the troops. Okay, I guess war trumps feminism. But a lot of, like, there's this whole sequence with this guy named Timber Woods, who's like a timber logging
amazing
magnate.
Name. Everyone has a crazy name.
His name is Timber Woods.
I just love it.
And his thing is anytime he falls for a woman, he has her hand painted onto his neckties, and Brenda Starr gets a job working as the cook is her cousin, actually, whose name is
A Breath of Breeze.
A Breath of Breeze gets a job as a cook working for Timber Woods.
She has to
Brenda sneaks in because she's trying to get it, and she plans to be 13 years old. She sneaks in, but this guy is in love with this 13-year-old, has her painted on his side.
No, he doesn't know. No. He falls in love with her in another situation.
Oh, that's right.
He's not in love with her as 13 years old.
That's right. But he, so he's a total pig. This is established, and she's constantly, every Sunday strip, she's like, this guy's such a pig, I hate this guy. And she's like, he wants his dinner served. She pours soup on his head.
Pours pea soup all over him and nicks his tie. Because she considers it objectifying, right?
Exactly. But there's many strips where he grabs her and kisses her. We got to talk about the way this is reprinted, because I don't know what happens after he grabbed her and kissed her, but she's constantly pissed off. But it seems like 10 weeks down the line, maybe she's thawing to him a little bit. Despite all this, and even with the mystery man that shows up with a patch, the first time he shows up in her apartment, he holds her at gunpoint and says, "Hide in the closet. I'm on the run, and I need a place to hide. And you're going in the closet with me, lady." And A Breath of Breeze is like, "Ooh, how romantic!" Right? This is her reaction. Her exact word is romantic. So
yes. So absolutely. So yeah, it's very much of its time in that respect.
Yes.
But on the other hand, it also pushes boundaries. Mm-hmm. For the period. So, of course, written and drawn by a female cartoonist.
Always. Through its entire history.
Always. We'll get to the
Even when
film.
she retired, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. So, always written and drawn by female writers and female artists, and by one woman for 40 years, its initial 40 years. So, it has these things that sound like so backwards. And yet, you know, Brenda's very feminine, but also she's very brave.
Yep.
You're like, her bravery is as characteristic as her feminine, as these exaggerated feminine qualities. So they're not mutually exclusive to be female and to be brave in the comic. So I think Dale Messick is pushing as hard as she can against kind of like the times and the mores of the period. You know, even characters like A Breath of Breeze, like she's like a woman as well, and she's overweight, and some of the gags are about her.
Yeah, there's some fat jokes in there.
There's fat jokes.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, I read that she eventually partners up herself.
Yes.
She has male attention, and also she appears. So you mentioned that the strips, when they were published on Sundays, they would have cut out
Yeah, paper
dresses.
doll cutouts, yeah.
Paper doll cutouts where you could dress the characters. A Breath of Breeze had cutouts, apparently. And now, we didn't read one of these strips, but there was, at one stage, either a Bretha or Brenda has a maid, and she's a woman of colour.
Yeah.
She's called Sibera.
Okay.
Which is or perhaps Siberia, which is a really strange name.
Yeah.
They all have bizarre names. So, of course, she's a domestic, which is a bit unfortunate. But on the other hand, she had her own stories where she would have agency, and also she had male attention as well. She had a paramour, a paramour of colour, whose name was Dusk Rose.
Excellent.
And in 1950, in a strip in 1953, they went on a date, the pair of them.
Okay.
They went on a date and enjoyed an afternoon on the beach where they held hands, and this was considered sufficiently controversial that the Tribune Syndicate that was providing the comic to various newspapers provided 2 editions of the strip for that day.
Okay.
One with the trip to the beach and one without.
Wow.
In case it was offensive to the readership.
Okay.
So,
well, that reminds me too. We're talking about her trying to push the envelope. They censored it whenever she drew cleavage or navel, apparently.
Yes.
And apparently it said on Wikipedia there was one episode where she drew Brenda smoking a cigar, and that was censored.
Interesting, because Hank O'Hare smokes all the time.
Hank O'Hare. There's another character we got to talk about. So
Hank O'Hare.
I read a bunch of these first in the this America's Comic Group ACG issue, and I was like, is Hank a... I thought it was a male character. It's a woman. No, and it was more clear reading like the Dales and stuff when she would show up in a skirt or something. Yes. But even then, I was like, "What's going on? This is a very masculine kind of character." Yeah. So not everybody is fabulous like Brenda.
A fabulous negligee wearing bombshell redhead. There's a character, a working woman. She is occasionally a figure of fun because she's so plain.
Yeah.
There's one story that we read where they go to a fashion show, the one where with the murdered model.
Yeah.
Where everyone finds it hilarious that Hank O'Hare is going to a fashion show because she's so plain.
Right.
She dresses like a man, she smokes a cigar.
Yeah.
She has hair sticking out from under her beret that she wears all the time. But nonetheless,
she was probably my favorite character.
Brilliant.
And somehow there's just something so oddball about her once I kind of figured her out. And that weird name, like I don't know if her name was ever explained. It's
just a hilarious.
Was it supposed to be short for Harriet?
Oh no, O'Hare is like the Irish surname, and Hank. Well, I mean, it's a man's. But
Hank is short for Harry, so her name must be Harriet.
Right, that makes sense.
Maybe, I don't know.
But it's just amazing. Everyone's got an amazing name.
Yeah.
So, I can confidently say I think this strip is progressive for the time.
Yes, and certainly at the stage we were reading it in '47, I think she had gotten her drawing chops were down pretty good at this stage. It's kind of a loose style, but really highly detailed. I think maybe I'm saying loose just because there's so much hair and clothing and flowing dresses and stuff, and it's not actually that.
She's just always wearing these most amazing outfits.
Yes.
All right, let's talk about the content.
Okay.
Stories.
Yes.
So I opened the book that you lent. I didn't read the one with only the Sundays.
Okay. Yeah.
I read the big collection, and the very first story is bonkers.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely.
Bonkers. So there are twins.
We don't know they're twins yet.
Okay, so
Brenda gets invited to a reading of a will.
Yes,
so this might be newsworthy. So it's like, okay, go to the reading of this will of this super famous, some super rich person has died, and for some reason, I guess the public is allowed to go.
And there's a daughter that's a recluse.
Yes.
And she wants to go to catch a glimpse of the daughter.
Yes. And the daughter shows up wearing this veil. So you can't see her face.
She's got we can see her body, which is very bodacious.
Yes. And she's hanging out with this doctor.
Yes. I can't remember the doctor's name, but it's probably crazy.
Yeah, and but when this daughter sees Brenda at the funeral, she's like, "That's the one. That's the girl with red hair. Who is she? She's the one I want, or whatever." Yes. And the doctor's like,
"You're right. She is the one."
Yeah, right. Yeah, he tries to delay her a little bit because the will hasn't been read, etc. I don't remember all that happens with this will reading. I don't think it's that important.
One of the key... No, there's a key thing in the will, which is that the will says that the fortune will go to the daughter, the sole daughter,
yes,
to be held in trust by the doctor until such time as he declares her cured.
Ah, okay, right. She has some mystery illness, right?
She has a mystery illness that the doctor treats her for. So, Brenda's desperate to talk to her and get the scoop.
Yes.
And then, amazingly, the doctor comes out and says, she wants to speak with you. She wants to meet with you. Come to our estate, tomorrow, and you will meet with her. And they go, and she's tucked up in bed.
But she meets the nurse.
Oh,
who's grotesque. This woman with this most grotesque face.
Right,
it's like a Dick Tracy face.
Yes, it is.
And they call her... I don't remember if they say what the nurse's name is, but Brenda's like, how can this super rich lady want a nurse that looks so grotesque? How could she handle it?
Yeah. And we meet her, and we only see her from the neck up, because she's tucked up in bed with the covers right up under her chin. But she's very beautiful, and she even looks a bit like... she looks a bit like Brenda, although she's a brunette and not a redhead.
Yes. Okay, so...
Long story short...
So she says, okay, I want you to... She's like... The woman in bed is... Mary Elizabeth is like, okay, I have some requests. I need you to do some things. They're going to sound absurd, but I want you to strip down, or put on this bikini, or put on this swimsuit.
Yep.
I mean, Dale Messick will take any opportunity to strip Brenda down and show her off.
Yep.
So we get her... She's kind of looks like she's in the swimsuit portion of the beauty pageant. She's walking around, then she's captured, she's injected by the doctor, she's knocked out. So it's this collusion is going on with this grotesque nurse. The beautiful sister's still lying in bed. The beautiful daughter, I should say, spoiler.
Spoiler. There are no spoilers.
And then we see... Okay, so then Brenda seems to leave the apartment. We've seen her injected by the doctor, but she leaves the apartment and gets into a cab and goes away. And
the taxi driver notices that she's wearing a mask.
It's a woman in a mask.
That it's a woman in a mask, He just makes a note of that. It turns out because he does the regular run at the Opera House and he recognises people that wear masks. He's learned to pick up the tell of a mask.
That's the only way.
And that's the only
You would have to work at an opera house like all the time to be able to pick it up.
Yeah.
So anyway, Brenda's all tied up, but...
well, it's revealed that the nurse and the bedridden woman are...
Twin sisters.
Twin sisters. I guess identical twins, but they've suffered a terrible malady.
Yes.
The one with the hideous face has a perfect body, and the one with the perfect face has a hideous body.
Yes.
And what they want is to... they want to cut off Brenda's head.
Yes.
And put the sister's perfect head on Brenda's body.
Yeah.
And put Brenda's head on the ugly sister's body. And then swap their brains.
Initially, Brenda's kind of okay with this because it's a scoop. She's like, this is going to make a great story once I get out of here.
Yes. And this, like, there's nothing like this like the last thing we read that was contemporaneous to this comic was Dick Tracy.
Yeah.
And there's nothing like this in Dick Tracy.
No.
Nothing so wild. Like we're talking like brain swapping surgery, like Get Out, that film that Jordan Peterson. This is like literally what we're talking about here.
Yeah.
This is in the 1940s.
Yeah. Yeah. So and then we find out that the woman who left in the mask was it was the nurse. The nurse, yes,
the one with the ugly face.
Yeah.
She only ever goes out in a mask or with her face concealed.
So Brenda's technically been missing for days. But they're not really... back at the newspaper, The Flash, it's called, the Daily Flash. Yep. They're kind of suspicious that she never actually left.
Yep.
And they figured out from the taxi driver. So she's been missing for like a week, and so two of the guys from the Daily Flash, I think Tom Taylor and like a photographer who she didn't recognize when she was coming out, which is one of the things that tipped them off. Detective Travers. I think he seems to work at the paper. I don't know. He's always hanging out there anyway. So they show up. They confront the doctor. The doctor presses a button and they fall through a trapdoor in the floor, conveniently right there where they were standing. They fall down into like a laundry chute or something. It didn't really get rid of them, so it wasn't really a great plan.
It was just to forestall them for a moment so that he can... It turns out that this is really the Doctor's... The Doctor is the nefarious one.
Yes.
The twins are just his dupes.
Yes.
He wants to advance his knowledge of immoral medical experimentation.
Yeah.
And Brenda manages to convince the sisters to find another way by revealing that she in fact knows identical twin brilliant plastic surgeons.
Yes. Who must have... Maybe we're probably in an earlier continuity, but I hope not.
I hope not.
I hope not. I hope she just made it up on the spot.
Yeah. She knows the world-renowned identical twin plastic surgeons and says, look, you don't have to kill me. Your doctor has kept this a secret from you that there are identical twin brilliant plastic surgeons out there that can fix your issues, who'll be thrilled to fix your issues for free. They're convinced because they don't really want to murder her. They let her. They free her, and the doctor is blown up, and his hands are blown off, so he can never commit medical evil again. His hands are blown off.
Yeah.
And then, sure enough, and I just kept waiting for these identical twin plastic surgeons to not be real, but no, they're real.
They're real.
They're real and they're Italian, I think. And
the Rayo brothers, yeah.
And then sure enough, they operate on the twins and they're fixed. They both have perfect faces and perfect bodies forever after. And I read this and my mind was just blown.
Yeah, absolutely. I was not expecting... I was really expecting some down-to-earth reporting, some crime.
Last week was
like
Skippy, right? Which was the most anodyne stuff, the most basic, tedious stuff you could possibly imagine. And then this, I thought I was reading Junji Ito or something.
Right, right. Yes, it's
like this is like a Junji Ito horror story,
especially with the hands getting blown. Well, not especially with that, but as a topper
with the hideous bodies and swapping.
Yes,
it's literally something out of like a modern horror manga.
Yeah,
and this is. And other stories like this, we read some other stories. There's one where they get beaten up by a female wrestler that throws them out of their room. It's non-stop. I couldn't believe how entertaining it was. It's absolutely the most entertaining, even more entertaining than Little Abner, I think.
Yeah. It wasn't intentionally funny like all that. Well, maybe it was.
No, that's the thing. No, you're right. And you're right, it's not, and therein lies its appeal. Okay, so I think it's as cool, I think I enjoyed it as much as Little Abner.
Right.
And it's because it's so camp.
Yes.
It's so camp. And I even went, and I enjoyed it so much, I even went back and read Susan Sontag's famous essay on Notes on Camp from the 1960s.
Right.
Read some of the things that make camp.
Okay, good. This is good. Let's do this.
It has to have, a love of the unnatural, of artifice, and of exaggeration, and the conversion of the serious into the frivolous. So none of the elements in the comic are particularly unique, but they're just such a thrilling kind of blend.
Yeah.
It's got elements of the fantastic. It's got gothic horror, crazy leading men with eye patches, people with nuts names. Apparently, Dale Messick actually said that she wrote the comics with a mantra in mind, and apparently that mantra was, authenticity is something I should always try to avoid.
Right. That makes sense.
Yeah.
That makes total sense. I don't think I don't think we've seen it all before at all. I'm not sure feel like the 1950s mad scientist movies, I feel like that stuff's a little bit later.
Yeah.
I feel like the whole plot with the murdered fashion model did not go the way I expected. I didn't even really understand how it concluded. Why did this guy... How did this...
She wanted to... I don't. And she put the dress on. It's a fantastic sequence. Brenda is dragooned into appearing on this runway. She's mistaken for the model.
She's mistaken for the actual model.
And there's this pushy designer who has this mustache. He's got this Salvador Dali kind of mustache. And he's pushing and prodding her. He won't listen to any protestations that she's not his model. And then at one stage, he shoves a dress at her or something. Put this on. Put on my ball gown. She puts it on. She walks out to the runway. He sees her just before he goes on and faints. He says, "Eek!" and faints. Yes. And she goes out and he's horrified. And then everyone comes to him and applauds him and says, "Oh, your dress, it was a smashing success." And he goes, "How could it be a success? She was wearing it upside down."
Yes, it has like big poofs on the feet, which would be where her breasts
would have been the cups.
Yeah.
It's just... And then, of course, he's revealed to be a woman wearing a fake mustache.
Yes. Now, he was a designer who... Wait, he killed the model because the model had actually designed all the dresses or something, and he was taking the credit, but I don't understand. I don't think it's really explained why the model would agree to this arrangement or anything.
Doesn't matter.
It's really bizarre.
It's like, as Sontag says, camp is art that proposes itself seriously, but cannot be taken seriously because it is too much.
Right. Yeah. Definitely.
So I've decided I like camp.
Yeah.
Because I liked Flash Gordon when we did that, and that's the campiest movie ever made, arguably. Yeah. And this comic,
We've got the dog. We haven't mentioned Breatha's dog, which thinks like Snoopy does. So we get the dog's thoughts. And at one point she feeds it chocolate, which would definitely kill it.
Yes, I noticed that as well.
So she has at one stage so there's a whole storyline in here about this paint that is used instead of stockings on her legs, which is an experiment done by Pesky, who works at the Flash office newsroom. I guess he's a part-time experimenter because somebody says, "Oh, she's used one of your experiments again," or something like that. But that turns out to be a dream, that whole sequence. But then she has a dream that in the dream, she has a dream that this futuristic car comes up and this guy in a cape and wearing an eye patch comes and rescues her.
That's Basil St. John.
But then she wakes up and then the actual guy shows up in her room, as I mentioned earlier, at gunpoint. So how could she have dreamed it?
This is his first introduction. Well, because he's just that... It's a prescient dream, I suppose.
I guess. Or he's that charismatic that he projected himself into her.
It's just so theatrical.
Yes, absolutely.
You know, camp... according to Sontag, has to be completely earnest. You know,
oh yeah, like I'm just looking at this panel where he disappeared, and then at the end of this storyline, I think with the model, he shows up and pulls her out of the burning building, and there's this like really like full on giant panel of him carrying her out of the flames with this very somber look on his face. And then he leaves her with the authorities and then just disappears into the crowd, looking over his shoulder.
Yeah. It can be funny, but the funniness isn't the point.
Yes.
No, it has to be utterly sincere.
Yes.
Coming from it has to be theatrical and glamorous, but coming from what does she say? It has to spring from an irrepressible, uncontrolled sensibility.
Yeah. And he's also got this whole thing about black orchids, which is another thing that's over the top. Like, it's really like he sends her black orchids to the office.
He sends black orchids to her all the time. He needs black orchids to live, it later transpires.
Yes.
He suffers from a family curse. Mm-hmm. This is in the film. He needs to extract a serum from the black orchid in order to prevent himself from going mad before his time. Whatever that means.
Yes. What does that mean?
If he doesn't get his black orchid serum, he will go crazy. And so the black orchid is his calling card. So whenever, when he leaves her black orchids, she knows it's him, because black orchids are his, they're his red right hand, It's his calling card, it's his pride and joy, but it's also his curse. So it's full of all this... all this overblown pathos, which is so funny. And the very last strip that was published in 2011, by which point Basil St. John, I think, is supposed to be dead. So in the very last strip, it's actually I found it and read it. So she says goodbye to everyone at the, because she's leaving her job at The Flash, the name of the newspaper. She says goodbye to everyone, they embrace, and just as she's leaving, a delivery man comes up and says, "Package for Brenda Starr." It's a box. She opens it. What's in the box, Kumar?
Black orchid.
It's a black orchid.
Right.
And she says, but what? But how? Oh, never mind. I guess I'll find out. And then off she wanders into the sunset.
Right. Wasn't there something in here about somebody getting a body being shipped out in a violin case or a cello case or something too?
No, that was the model that was in the clothes trunk, wasn't it?
Yes. But there was, so the neighbor had a viol case. Right, okay. Case of the big violin. Okay, hang on. I can't remember. I wrote it in my notes for some reason. There was something weird about it.
Brilliant.
So these guys, it's left, so the big case is left in like a mailroom or a coat check or something. Oh, yeah, and I don't know why I wrote this down. Oh, because they didn't call, when they find it, this giant case, they don't call the cops. They decide to call Brenda Starr.
Yeah.
They're like, why? I've seen her once and she's some doll. I get it. You think you'll make a hit with her. I know I will. Hand me that telephone, Freddie.
Brilliant. And
similarly, Brenda, when she finds out, when she's like, when the model is missing, they're like, should we call the cops? And she's like, no, there's going to be a story here. Let's get the story first.
Yeah.
All other concerns are secondary.
Which is something that carries over into the film. So should we talk about the film?
Yes.
How do you think?
Okay, yes.
All right, let's do this. All right, should we just jump straight into...
Yeah, so actually we won't jump straight into it. So there was a Brenda Starr serial in 1945.
Okay.
And I don't know, I think it was probably like 13 episodes or something. It's probably about 4 hours worth of something. There was a TV movie starring Jill St. John in 1976.
Yes, I saw that. I didn't see it, rather, but I know of its existence now.
And then this movie that we're talking about today was filmed in 1986.
Yes. Supposed to come out...
released in France in 1989. So if you look online, it will say Brenda Starr 1989.
Right.
Didn't come out in the US until 1992.
Right.
So there was a...
And the figures for its box office take are only for the US domestic market.
Okay.
Not the international market, because it has such an odd release history. I didn't...
Yeah, it came out in Zimbabwe and stuff.
I think it was Zambia.
For Zambia, yeah.
Yeah, Zambia. Just these odd Costa Rica, all these odd places that the production company was able to sell it to. But but it did have a very tortuous release, which we'll get into. Or should I talk about it now? Perhaps before we talk about the plot, I could talk about how it got made.
Okay,
because it's interesting.
Yes, all right.
All right, so early on, so say 1981, there was some buzz that it was going to be made into a film. With apparently, Deborah Harry from Blondie, was going to star as...
Well, there's that line in that Blondie song about Brenda Starr.
Yeah.
Which song was it? Was it Rapture?
The one you posted, wasn't it?
No, that was a different one which mentioned Josie and the Pussycats.
Okay.
That was a Debbie Harry song. There's a Blondie song where she says she thinks she's Brenda Starr. I feel like it's Rapture, but I'm not sure. Anyway, go ahead.
So apparently that was just a single reference to that.
Okay.
Perhaps just industry buzz.
Right.
That Deborah Harry from Blondie was interested in starring as Brenda Starr in a film.
Right.
But then enter Terry Shields, Brooke Shields' mum and manager.
Right.
She wanted Brooke Shields to play Brenda Starr. Apparently, Brooke had wanted to play Brenda since she was little.
Okay.
Allegedly.
Okay.
Who knows? Terry was apparently one of those, tiger mothers who was really pushy and in promoting Brooke Shields' career.
Yeah.
But not only, she wanted Brooke for the film, but she had other news. She had funding. She had a backer.
Okay.
And this backer was a Saudi prince, no less.
Okay. This sounds like a Brenda Starr script.
It does. This is Sheikh Abdul Aziz Al Ibrahim.
Okay. Not Sheikh Yerbuti. Okay.
He was willing to fund the film on 3 conditions. That Brooke Shields played Brenda Starr.
Okay.
That the film had to be for theatres, not for television. Apparently they were originally going to... it was going to be a made-for-TV movie at this point. But he wanted a theatrical release. And that there would be no advance distribution deal negotiated at this point.
Ah, okay.
And that last one is really not a great sign.
Yeah.
As we'll see. Alright, so, fine, it's agreed. He stumps up the money. They start filming. There's problems. You know, cinematographers are fired.
Okay.
At least 2 cinematographers
I believe
fired.
it.
Apparently, Timothy Dalton is cast as Basil St. John.
Yep.
This is before he played James Bond in The Living Daylights.
Yes. This
He
would have been after... He was in a Wuthering Heights as Heathcliff at some stage, but that might have even been in the 70s, now that I think about it. But anyway, go ahead.
Right. He apparently had to bring in a mate who could do cinematography to help finish the film. A screenwriter called Delia Ephron, who would later on to go on to write You've Got Mail.
Okay.
Michael with John Travolta, where he plays an angel.
Okay, I've seen that.
And Sisterhood of the Travelling Pants, most famously.
Okay.
This, I think, might have been her first screenwriting.
Okay, so her career survived this.
Oh, yeah.
Which is
I would say she used a pseudonym. She had her name taken off. She did rewrites, but had her name taken off.
Interesting. Okay, because there's at least 2 female writers listed in the credits.
Yes, well, she's one of them, but it's a fake name.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
Gotcha.
I haven't written it down, but it's called Wayna Bird, you know, the equivalent.
Yeah.
So, that's about all I could find about the production, but sounds like troubled production.
Yeah.
Alright, now we get into the real problems.
Okay.
The film, as you know, was supposed to be released in 1987.
Yeah.
The shell company that the Sheikh set up, which was called Mystery Men,
okay, yes,
to produce the film, tried to hire New World Pictures to do the distributing. Okay, this is Roger Corman's production company.
Yeah, right.
Although I think he'd sold it by that point, unfortunately, so he wasn't still in charge. So he wanted New World Pictures to do the distribution, or his representatives at Mystery Men did. But they found out something at this point, something unfortunate. They hadn't secured the television rights.
Ah, right.
They'd only secured the film rights.
Okay.
So New World was not interested in distributing the film if they were not going to make any money off of eventual television showings of it. Apparently, the Chicago Tribune Syndicate still own the TV rights. Okay. They withdrew. You know, Mystery Men threatened to withhold the film and shelve it for years at a time.
The irony here, if I can just interject for a second, is this really looks like a TV movie. It looks like an episode of Magnum P.I. or something. It's so cheap and chintzy.
Yes,
that,
chintzy is a good word, yeah.
Yeah, you would want those TV rights, because I could actually see how this might actually do okay on a late-night TV slot or something like that.
You're right, actually, since you point that out, especially since we were watching it in low res.
The only version we were able to find, you can watch the whole thing on YouTube, is in 4:3 ratio.
You're right, it was in 4:3.
And as far as I know, I watched the DVD rip, got on the high seas, and the DVD rip was 4:3.
Right, yeah. So, So they wanted those TV rights. The whole thing fell apart. Apparently New World sued the company, and it languished for years until eventually another company, which was called AMPM, bought the rights, released the film in 1992, well past the buzz for comic book movies. You know, Batman and Dick Tracy.
Well, otherwise it would have come out before Batman and Dick Tracy.
Yeah, well...
But it would have come out... When was The Living Daylights and License to Kill?
Question, but it
might have been 87 even. It might have been right around that time. It can't have been
much later. But this film was on the shelf for 5 years.
Yeah.
Which is the kiss of death.
Yeah.
And it absolutely bombed.
Yeah.
Bombed. The reviews... Terrible reviews. It made... Its domestic gross was about $67,000 on a $15 million budget.
Whoa! $15 million? Where is that money?
15 million. 15.
Where's that money?
Yeah.
Where's that $15 million? This looks like a $30,000 TV production. $15 million.
$15 million, at least. There's various estimates floating around. Some go as high as $22 million, including promotion, whatever promotion there was.
Whoa, okay.
Reviews were awful.
Yeah.
One review called it one of the worst movies ever made. Even taken on its own spoofed up terms, Brenda Starr is so flaccid and cheap looking, so ineptly pieced together, that it verges on the avant-garde. I suspect they won't even like it in France.
I know what that mean. I know what they mean because the editing is so choppy from scene to scene. You're like, how did these people get here? Where are they coming from? You don't have no idea how people got where they are, what's going on. There's a sequence at the end of the movie where one character is in a room apparently looking at the other characters, and they keep cutting to face. I'm like, where is he? He doesn't look like he's not in the shot with the rest of the people. It's so bizarre. So many scenes I was just so confused. So I totally understand that that's like an avant-garde jump cut kind of thing. Yeah. You could misread it that way for sure because it's so poorly put together.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So shall we? Before we talk about what we thought of it, shall we talk about the plot?
Absolutely. So
this plot is okay. Go please.
Yeah. So opening credits has some comic panels. I don't think any of the comic art in this was actually drawn by Dale Messick, but don't quote me on that. Certainly not in the movie. In the credits, maybe, but I usually do like it when we get that. So it's an
old favorite because the opening credits had drawings and
yes. Well, usually when we have an opening credits that has panels from the comic strip in previous instances, it usually means the filmmakers are saying this comic is awesome and we're going to make a movie of it. I think in this case, after that first minute of credits, they're like, this comic is a piece of shit and we're going to make this movie up, was the sense I got from it.
Yeah, well, I mean, I was a bit baffled because we see the comic being drawn and whoever's drawing it is fucking it up.
Yeah.
They keep making errors and rubbing it out.
Yes.
And then, oh crap, the paper tore. Then he pours coffee all over Brenda Starr's face accidentally.
Yeah.
We see a pencil sharpener over and over. I wrote in my notes, what is with this pencil sharpener? Well, he's having to sharpen his pencil over and over because he's having to do so many redos.
Yes.
The purpose of this, it turns out, was to establish that the artist doing the comic is a bit of a schlub. Like,
yes,
is got down on his luck, kind of nebbish.
Right.
But as you say, the actual effect it seems to have is fuck this comic.
Yeah.
And that's not a great way to start your comic book movie.
So this guy, it turns out his name is Mike Randall.
Yeah.
So Mike Randall is the current artist in 1986 on Brenda Starr.
I have a big problem with this already.
Okay, yes. So he's getting notes from Dale Messick. He's got a note that says what to do.
And presumably some actual art from her, because he has a picture of Brenda, what she should be wearing this week.
Yes.
So he's getting his...
And he's annoyed with the strip, he's annoyed with the costumes, annoyed with Brenda, he's complaining about it out loud. So right away, immediately I'm like, why do we have a male cartoonist in this role? Now, later in the movie it's obvious because that's to set up another romance, which is bizarre, which we will get to, but I'm like, no, this is a real violation of 50 years of history here.
At this point, you're right. At this point, almost 50 years of the comic that's always been written and drawn by women, most of that time for only one woman.
Yeah.
And now it's a guy doing it. Like, what a slap in the face. Yeah. I just found that so irritating right off the bat.
So he's drawing and he's very annoyed, and then Brenda comes to life in a little cartoon in the panel, and she's like, I'm so annoyed with you, I quit the strip. And she walks off panel, and he's like, what? And he calls his friend, he's like, hey, Brenda's
gone, what am I supposed to do? How am I going to get paid?
Yeah, it's... crazy. So meanwhile,
no work has been done to set this up. Brenda just comes to life.
She just comes to life.
You know what I thought of?
Yeah.
The Last Action Hero.
Yes.
So this is a similar premise to The Last Action Hero, that there's another world in the world of the fictional medium, of the visual medium, where they have their own lives.
Yes, but that was also Purple Rose of Cairo. Last Hero basically ripped off Purple Rose.
I've never heard of that, so I'd be very much interested in coming back to that at a later point. But my point was, The Last Action Hero is better in a couple of ways. First of all, there was a gimmick, the magic ticket.
Yeah.
There's no magic ticket in this.
No, it just happens.
She just
starts talking.
Going, you and your stupid shoes.
There's no shooting star that goes by his window when he's wishing he couldn't draw the strip or anything like that. She's just alive in the comic.
Yeah.
It is so weird.
No, it's crazy.
When it started, I was going in a different direction because I didn't know she was going to come to life. When I saw this guy drawing the Brenda Starr comic strip, I immediately thought of The French Lieutenant's Woman, Tristram Shandy, A Cock and Bull Story, and Adaptation. All three of these movies were about people trying to adapt a book or a book of poetry that was impossible to adapt to film. So the movie they made was about people trying to make the movie. That was like that's how they solved that problem. Or they were books that really reference themselves constantly in some way that, like, how can you film this? We can't. Let's make a movie about trying to make it.
Well,
and I thought...
We're both giving this film too much credit.
Well, no, I'm saying that's a solution when you have a very difficult text to deal with that you can't make a movie of. You're telling me you can't make a movie out of this face swap scientist stuff?
They absolutely...
They could have done that. There's no reason for this... outside structure, which gets more and more complicated as it goes on.
I completely agree. So this framing device that Brenda has come to life, and he needs to... What he does is he draws himself in the comic, and then wakes up in the comic.
Yes.
And that's kind of our... That's what's used to set up our story.
Yeah.
There's another story within the story, which is that Brenda needs to find the rocket fuel formula in South America.
Right. So inside the... Okay, so go ahead.
I agree with you. That story would have been fine.
Yeah.
That would have been a perfectly normal Brenda Starr adventure that Brenda had to travel to South America to find secret rocket fuel.
Yes.
And had to hang out with handsome men.
Yes.
And fight off
and wear
Russian
fabulous
spies.
dresses.
Wear fabulous dresses. Fight off Russian spies played by Jeffrey Tambor.
Yes.
From A Russian Again, as he played a Russian in The Death of Stalin.
Yeah.
All of that would have been fine and, dare I say it, good without this crap.
I'm not sure about good, but definitely better. Definitely 100 times better. And I'll tell you. Okay, so after this business where she walks a panel, then we get to go into Brenda's world, which is in the 1940s.
Yep.
And it starts with this hostage situation that's got the machine gun. She falls out the window with the guy. We get a terrible special effect where she rotates
Austin Powers. It's like Austin Powers. You remember that scene in Austin Powers where it's a gag. He maneuvers the woman in front of him when they're both falling off a building.
Yeah.
And then he lands on her and survives.
Yeah.
That, but played straight.
Played pretty straight. There's a woman from a rival newspaper, Libby Lipscomb. The actress who plays her is so over the top, so hammy. It's wild. Everybody in this movie is in a different movie. Because when Hank O'Hare shows up, that actress is really good.
Yeah.
Like, she's like, I want the Hank O'Hare movie. Anyway, so Brenda ends up in the hospital. Now, it turns out her newspaper, The Flash, is about to go out of business. But they need a giant scoop to save the paper. Now, I don't think this is how newspapers work, even in the 1940s. I don't think one mega scoop is going to save your newspaper. But anyway,
stakes.
She's
This is kind of like a Brenda Starr kind of stakes thing.
Yeah.
I got to get the scoop that's going to keep the paper in business and save all my mates' jobs. Fine. All this stuff I was fine with.
Well,
we had, in the first scene, there's a guy who's holed up. He's just done a bank robbery, right? He's holed up in the top floor of an apartment block. The cops are shooting at him. He's shooting at the cops. He riddles a police car with bullets. And the next thing you know, Brenda Starr's tapping on in the window, asking him to let her in because she wants to ask him about his childhood. She wants a scoop on who he is.
Yeah.
And I liked that. This is an establishing character moment. She's brave. She's
foolhardy.
Oh, brave to the point of foolhardiness.
Yes.
She's got absolutely iron will, and she'll get that story no matter what.
Yeah.
And she looks fabulous. Brooke Shields looks amazing in this movie.
I think she's like 21 when she made this or something like that.
Yeah, very young. Maybe even between 19 and 21 years of age. Yeah. She was still at Princeton University, I think, at this point. But she looks gorgeous. Yeah. And the clothes she wears are fantastic.
Yes, designed by Bob Mackie.
Okay. Should I know who that is?
I think I know the name Bob Mackie. I think he's a famous designer.
Right, okay. So, famous designer, and she always looks incredible.
Yeah.
She's gorgeous, like, absolutely stunning.
Yeah. So she ends up in the hospital. There's a scene where she throws a vase at Libby when Libby shows up. I'm like, you gotta hurt this woman. But there's a funny moment where she opens her closet and it's full of dresses, like in her hospital room. But I don't know. I didn't feel like the jokes were landing, but I knew they were jokes. If you know what I mean.
I on the other hand was laughing.
Okay.
A lot. You know how you felt with Monkey Bone? How you were laughing in Monkey Bone?
I'm not going to blame you for laughing at these jokes. They were jokes.
Vannie asked you when you came.
Yeah.
She said, "What do you think of the movie?" You said it was terrible.
Yeah.
And Vannie said to me, "Kumar said the movie was terrible, but I heard you laughing the whole time when you were watching it."
So she comes back to the office. I think there's more talk of the paper being shut down. She's going to protest. The chief, the editor-in-chief, Liv Wright, is played by Charles Durning, who was Chief Brandon in Dick Tracy.
Wow, really?
Yeah, he's from Tootsie. He's most famous for Tootsie, I think. But that's a little connection there.
Another funny name, Liv Wright.
Liv Wright, yeah. And he tells her about this scientist, this Einstein-like guy, played by Henry Gibson from Laugh-In.
Yeah.
And he's in this video, this super racist video. He's showing these natives how the super fuel and how it works in his airplane or whatever. Okay, so she's trying to get the scoop on this super fuel. This guy's gone missing, the scientist. So she goes to see. She just goes to see the president.
It's Harry Truman.
Yeah, which I don't think Brenda Starr in the comics could just call the president and go, and she's just playing piano with him in the next scene.
Well, I don't look. We read it. I think Brenda Starr going and seeing the president is something that absolutely could have happened.
It could happen, maybe.
She just goes and plays piano with him.
I do feel like she's just working at the paper. She's always, I don't know. Anyway, so for some reason he demonstrates the power of the rocket field by burning a piece of paper with a magnifying glass.
No. What he does?
What was the connection?
So we had this crazy film with the Einstein-looking guy in somewhere, surrounded by a bunch of. Okay, so they're natives.
Yeah.
They're meant to be South American natives.
There's so much brown face in this movie. It is shocking. There's a lot. But we'll get to all the other bits. Anyway, go on.
And this scene baffled me. Is this meant to be funny? He's demonstrating his fuel, but instead of being in, a symposium, surrounded by men in white coats demonstrating the power of his new rocket fuel, he's in a village in South America surrounded by Indians, South America, like native South Americans in war paint and with spears.
Yeah.
And he's going, look, this airplane, no fuel. Now I pour in water and my serum. Now it has fuel. And they're all, it's like, these guys, what is happening here?
Yes.
What?
That's how I felt about the whole movie. Look.
Why is he supposed to be impressed by...
You know what, it's worse. At the end of the movie, this is paralleled when we get another scene where when they recover the fuel, Timothy Dalton puts it in his car and explains it to all the natives. But why would he explain what it was to them when it's supposed to be a secret? So why not just put it in your car and drive away?
Yeah, it's so weird. So that scene makes no sense. But okay, so as you said, it's borderline racist. No, so crazy. And then Brenda, the editor said, Liv Well says, this is what you got to do, Brenda, to save the paper. And she says, okay, I'll do it. I'll find Dr. Livingston or whatever his name is. And then it's brilliant. She's wearing this amazing white blazer. Yeah. And then she steps in front of the projector and the face of the guy is projected on the blazer. Yes. And it's such a great shot. Yeah. It's such a shame it came right after this crazy racist mini scene. Yeah. Then to get the scoop, she goes right to the top, to where the buck stops, at Harry Truman's desk.
She tries another bunch of people first, but then finally she
settles on where the buck stops. Yeah. Which is... And there's a Harry Truman impersonator, presumably, playing piano with her, and he announces that so vital is this fuel for world peace because And he gets out a magnifying glass and he burns a sheet of paper, like you said. And he said, with this fuel, it would be trivial to put giant magnifying glasses in orbit and burn cities the way I just burned this piece of paper.
Okay.
Which doesn't make sense, but that's okay.
Okay. It's
something that could have appeared in the comic.
Right. So then we learned that the Russians are also looking for this fuel. Jeffrey Tambor is the head. And there's one of these short Russian ladies.
Jeffrey Tambor.
She's just like that character from Russia with Love. Basically, it's the same type.
Yes.
He ends up on the plane next to her somehow, and
pretending to be Puerto Rican with a Russian accent.
Yeah. He drugs.
I cannot wait to see my home again. And she said, "Are you Puerto Rican?" Duh.
Yeah. So he's in the seat next to her, and then he drugs her drink, and then the next scene she's waking up, she's tied up. Like, we don't get any of her being captured or tied up. Or nothing. It's just jump cut.
Yep.
She's tied up.
She's tied up, and they've got... This is another scene that I really loved. Sorry, I was just... The first half of this movie, especially...
Okay.
I was just laughing the whole way through. There's this great scene where Jeffrey Tambor's got all of her cosmetics out of her bag.
They're trying to figure out what all the stuff is.
Looking at the full table, and he says, "Why is she carrying all these cosmetics? There must be for more than one woman."
Right.
It's like, you know... So I'm just like, no, it's probably just for her. He's like, how could it be just for her, you know? And it's just such a funny bit. Because, of course, they're from the Soviet Union, you know. And,
yes.
Yeah, this is a... But also, it's funny because Brenda will have more cosmetics than the average woman because she's so fabulous.
Right. Yes, that's right. So I was
just cackling away as I watched this.
Yeah.
And then there's a great scene where she gets out of her bonds and she escapes from them with the cosmetics.
She hits them with her handbag, and then she sprays like perfume at them, and they're like all like dazed.
She throws foundation in their faces.
Yeah. Yes.
And unfortunately, then after that, it's just ruined. And one of the things that...
Well, and then when these Russians are fumbling around, we get all these like timpani sound effects, like boom, 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 like all this really stupidly cartoony stuff, which to me was really telegraphing that the creators thought this is a comic book kind of thing, and we're going to keep it at comic book level. Or is this
a 40s thing? Or...
Yeah, we haven't talked about the music too, because the music is really like they bought it from the archives. It's just the most cliched 40s sounding big band music. And that's one of the things, when you mentioned the $15 million budget, I was like, well, where did it go? Because definitely nobody composed this, I'm sure. I feel like it just came out of the archives. They just went down there and found some tapes.
I guess it went on the outfits, because they certainly are fabulous.
Yes.
But I completely agree. So the goofy sound effects, like boing, boo, and the slapstick.
Yes.
When in the last 50 years has slapstick been funny? Like this great scene.
Yeah.
It looks like the Three Stooges or something.
Yes.
So
absolutely.
Right after this great scene with them staring at the cosmetics and then her escaping with the cosmetics, we have this lazy slapstick scenes where, you know, like they're dangling out of windows and the Russian woman is stepping on Jeffrey Tambor's head.
Yeah.
And it's not just this scene, it's over and over and over for the rest of the film. Yep. We have endless slapstick scenes. And
not good slapstick. I think that's the distinction. It's not really good or creative or...
No, it's just is it funny when people run into one another? Or when people throw a handbag back and
then you make a boom sound effect as if that's going to make it funny?
It's terrible.
Yeah. Yeah. Then she escapes to... She goes to this hotel.
So she's trying to get to...
She's trying to get to the scientist, but she gets... Who is she supposed to meet? I don't remember. There's this band. We get this band.
Basil St. John has shown up at this point, and he alone knows where...
Yes.
He alone knows where...
Yes, he's the one that provided with the information that he was in South America.
In her office, which is bugged by every intelligence service in the world.
Yes.
And then they met... It's so great. They meet in... After she's escaped from the Russians, they meet in a restaurant in... I assume it's in Puerto Rico, right?
Yeah.
And they're surrounded by Secret Service agents of every nation.
Yes.
And they all have flags.
The flags on the tables.
Like they have an American flag. The CIA ones are all wearing aviator sunglasses. Yes. They have American flag on their table. The French one, they have a French flag. The British one has a British flag. I just found that so funny.
So somehow there's a band at this hotel, which does not sound anything like a 40s band. They really sounded like a 70s band. It was very confused. But anyway, so after this meeting, somehow she has to... Is this the one where he gives a speech about how you're not a little girl playing with paper dolls? I
don't remember that part.
Well,
I do remember that Basil St. John, Timothy Dalton, shows up on a horse at one point.
He shows up on a horse, and then he pulls her onto the horse.
Then they ride
behind a tree.
Airplane.
There's a flash, and then suddenly they're on two horses. They're each on a horse.
It's never explained.
I'm like, why?
And then they ride into an airplane.
Are they saying that this is the kind of thing that happens in comic strips? Is that suddenly there's two horses? I don't understand why. Why not just have them ride together onto the airplane instead of splitting into two horses?
I did like how they rode into the airplane.
Sure,
but the fact that there was suddenly one horse multiplied into two with no
behind a tree for no reason.
You're right. It does seem a little.
By the way, we haven't mentioned that a lot of the transitions you can see again. Where is that $15 million? Because a lot of times when there's a transition, they just do it with cartoons, like they did in Prince Valiant.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
They have a little animated sequence.
Tank Girl.
Yes, that's right. Yeah.
Yeah, or a wipe. At one point where they're fighting crocodiles, they have a crocodile mouth wipe where it...
Yes, that's right.
You're right. It didn't occur to me, but it does look as though it were made for television.
So at some point, maybe after they escape, they sit at a table together, and he says, "You're not a little girl playing with paper dolls." There's a real insult to the strip there, and then he gives a speech about the black orchids and how he needs them to stay sane.
Yes.
Now at this point, so she goes to stay in the hotel, and I wrote down this note, which within a second of writing it was answered. But I wrote, so we haven't mentioned that Mike Randall has followed her. Mike Randall has gone into the comic strip, as we mentioned, and he's been trying to track her down.
Yeah.
And he reads a newspaper with the Brenda Starr comic, which shows him exactly what's happening as it's happening. But he only does this once. I don't know why he doesn't pick up a newspaper every day to find out where he's supposed to go or whatever. Anyway,
this is very, very
doesn't
lazy.
Make any. It's
very
so
lazy
crazy. It doesn't make any sense. Anyway,
doesn't a gypsy woman appear? He reads about a gypsy woman?
He reads, and in the next panel there's a gypsy woman. He looks up, a gypsy woman appears. So whatever's in the strip is going to happen. So he could look at the paper every day. And anyway,
there's potential here for to say something clever.
Oh,
kind of like the way the last action, but it's not. The film cannot make up its mind what's going on here.
Yeah.
Right. So I would say. Okay, perhaps this isn't going to surprise anyone, but I was really enjoying this movie.
Okay. Yeah.
Really enjoying it, actually.
Okay.
Until Mike shows up.
Right. Okay. Well, I wrote a note. This is the note. The note I wrote was, because suddenly we're, 45 minutes into the movie.
Yeah.
I thought back, and I wrote a note. Does she know she's a comic strip character?
I wrote exactly the same
And then, in that scene, Mike shows up, and he's like, I need you to come back to the comic. She's like, I'm not going back to the comic strip. So she knows she's a comic strip character. No one else in this universe does.
But maybe they do, because Timothy Dalton does. At the end of the... Okay,
well, at the end, she says, I'm going to... She says,
I'm going to go to the real world. And he knows what she means, but no, he does know.
That's right. He doesn't bat an eye.
No.
He's just like, okay.
And she knows that she can't afford the clothes she wears.
Yeah, so there's some attempts at metatextual humor here, where she's like, I'm a reporter, I can't afford these clothes. Like, they're making fun of the comic in these ways, and she's like, when she sees his belly button, she freaks out. She's like, what is that disgusting thing?
Because no one in their world has a belly button.
That's right, which is a reference that nobody would get, because they didn't have Wikipedia when this movie came out.
No. Well, he explains it. He says, the censors wouldn't let me draw a belly button. Yeah. So, like, no one would have anything under their clothes then. Presumably they wouldn't have genitals either. No. People, they wouldn't have circulatory systems.
Anyway, so there's all these kind of... In this one scene, they're trying to cram in all these things that would be in Deadpool. Right?
Yeah.
Like, that. This is what... How can this be? We're in a comic book kind of stuff.
But they don't lean into it. And it's not like... I keep coming back to The Last Action Hero, which I think is a pretty clever movie. So I don't know about... You'll have to introduce me to this thing that it riffs on. But, in The Last Action Hero, the world that Arnold's character lives in makes sense. It has its own logic.
Yes.
So so on the surface, it conforms to what we see when we see the film, but when you dive into it, there are other reasons for why he behaves in that way, but he is not aware that he is a film character.
Yeah.
He's just living in a world with its own rules that happens to conform to the rules that we see when we watch it. Fine. But in this, there's nothing like that. Instead, Brenda is aware she's in a comic, but it doesn't bother her. She still cares about...
She acts like it's her job, like it's a thing she can go back to her.
But her job is being a reporter.
That's right.
So everyone... We're supposed to take at face value that there's a president, there's a crisis involving fuel, the president's worried about, satellites raining solar fire down on the Earth, and yet at the same time, all of these people are aware they're comic book characters.
Are they?
No,
this is the thing.
But
they don't act like it.
No, but because
it's only mentioned
because it's not well written.
Yes.
Because they haven't thought it through.
No.
They just wrote a few throwaway gags.
Yeah.
And had this terrible framing device with Mike. Like, I would have loved this film if they'd done away with Mike. I think.
Yes. Would have been better, for sure.
Okay. Maybe you might have loved it, but
because
it would have been
immediately after at the end of this scene, we get for some reason the porter shows up in the room and he's this Indian with a turban,
brown face again,
brown face doing a terrible accent, and meanwhile Libby Lipscomb from the rival reporter show, she's on the chase for this as well, and she comes up to this pilot, this seaplane pilot, and she manages to get a ride by offering this guy her garter belt.
Yeah.
There's all sorts of sleaziness, weird stuff going on
later
here,
on,
and he's got this put-on accent as well.
He won't take money. He'll only take her garter belt, and she literally lifts her skirt.
Yeah.
And winks at him.
Yeah.
And then later on, when he has to rescue her, he says, "This time I'm not going to be satisfied with your garter belt."
Right.
And then we cut to a scene of the plane
and she's
bouncing
moaning
up and down, and they're clearly having sex in the plane as they leave. And
yes.
She's exchanged sex for salvation.
Jesus Christ. Okay, so Mike and Brenda escape through the jungle. There's a long quest to find where this guy is. There's a scene where he tries to convince her to say shit, and she tries to convince him to say golly or something like that.
Jeepers.
Just interminable. They come across a traveling carnival, which sets up in the middle of nowhere. Where there's no customers or anything, but they're putting on their whole show. They're in the jungle. Bizarre. So then the Russians find them. How? How did the Russians know they'd gone down the Amazon? They just show up.
Yeah.
More
slapstick.
There's more slapstick. There's a whole thing with the Trapeze Act. Oh my God, there's a whole... Yeah, it's just lame. Lots of lameness going on here. Especially with the Russians and their pratfalls and stuff. So they escape again. Now Mike starts making out with Brenda in the truck that they escaped in, and the truck crashes. So that's how that...
So Brenda has no reason whatsoever to like Mike. He is absolutely
She does not
designated...
before or since, and he didn't like her before he met her.
This is so tacked on, this story. He's absolutely the designated love interest. She has every reason to like Basil St. John because of the history in the comics, because he's played by Timothy Dalton.
Yeah.
And he has all the secrets. He's broodingly handsome, smouldering, and he has all these, he's got his amazing tortuous secret with his black orchids. And then you got this goofball Mike, who's just a complete loser.
Yeah.
And yet Brooke Shields is making out with him in one scene because the script says so. And I just hate it. So there'd be a love triangle.
So then after they crash, then Basil St. John shows up again. She says, finally she says, how did you find us? He says, I have my ways. The end. Never mentioned again. I kind of was like, okay, I guess in the comic, Basil St. John just had his ways and would show up, even out of dreams. So maybe that's all right.
That's right.
But really, we should have been asking this of every character in this movie in every scene. How did you get here? So they finally find the Henry Gibson scientist guy, and he dies instantly, wasted in the role. But he has the formula in his hands in little vials, and they take that, And then they're escaping across the river. There's full of crocodiles. Libby shows up again. And Libby grabs Brenda's handbag.
Yeah, she knows.
Which has the vials in it. Now, how did she know that the scientist was dead? How did she know the vials were in the handbag?
Doesn't matter.
I think it matters, but they don't.
No, they don't care.
The people who made this movie were not like...
It's like she says, I just want to powder my nose, I need your mirror. And then she's trying to yank the bag.
Right.
And it's like, well, how could she possibly know that the serum's in the bag?
How could she know the guy was dead? How did they know? How did she know they found the guy at all?
Yeah, I kept waiting. Originally I thought it was being played straight and that she really was just trying to get a mirror really bad.
Right. Oh, right.
But no, you're right though, Kumar. Like, we were supposed to assume that she knew that the vials were in there.
Yeah.
When that's impossible.
Now we get this moment. So the Russians show up, of course. They always show up. There's a huge fight involving these crocodiles. Now, they pulled Libby out of the water, even though she's an enemy reporter, rival reporter. They pulled her out. They're like, there's crocodiles. We can't leave her in the water.
Yeah.
They pull her out. Lots of people start falling in the water. Doesn't matter. The crocodiles. There's literally a scene in which Brenda... We didn't do pause the podcast because you might want to watch this.
We paused it just because
we paused
to talk about Dune.
We didn't pause it to... we didn't pause it to mention the one spoiler possibly in this movie is that Brenda surfs on... She water skis on 2 crocodiles.
Yes.
Now,
what
is this out of place in this movie? I don't know. Maybe not.
I don't think.
Is it out of place in the Brenda Starr comic
I don't think
strip?
Brenda Starr would ever have surfed on crocodiles. I can't see it happening. It's too much.
It is really going too far. Finally, one of these crocodiles.
One of the crocodiles eats Jeffrey Tambor.
And then floats away with the cigar. Very obviously.
It eats Jeffrey Tambor first, and then it eats the To Rush With Love character.
Right.
The diminutive woman.
But it's very clearly a paper mache crocodile.
It's awful.
It's so bad. Like, where's that $15 million? Really, spend some money on the crocodile. Come on.
Good question.
It looks so bad. So then they go to to drive back to Basil's estate, they put the formula into a car. This is where he explains to the villagers what the formula is and how awesome it is.
He seems like a traveling huckster. Yeah. Come on, and see the magic fuel.
Yes, why you're trying to keep this out of other countries' hands. Please don't explain it to the locals. Yeah, and then
I expected. I thought the scene was building up to something. I thought the serum wasn't going to work.
Yeah. Right.
And I thought, why are we getting this scene? It must be that the serum now is not going to work, and they've been tricked, or.
Right.
But how could that be? Because they'd already used some of the serum to set the river on fire in order to escape from the Russians before they got eaten by crocodiles. So that wouldn't have made sense. It's just there for no reason.
Yeah.
Maybe a bookends.
So then they get back, but then Libby and her pilot boyfriend show up and they tie them up.
They go to Basil St. John's house in deepest Brazil.
Yes.
That's where they are. But somehow Libby knows where Basil St. John lives.
Yes.
Has got there before them, despite being in coitus in a plane in the previous scene.
Yep. And then they tie them up and take the formula, the fuel, and then in the next scene they're not tied up. Why? I don't know. We never get any in-betweens of... We never get any ADR where somebody say, good thing we got out of those bonds somehow. You know, somebody with their back turned saying, lucky those knots were so loose.
Time had passed, they'd managed to get out. I think they were just tied up just to let them make their escape.
Yeah. And then they find out that
with it.
The fuel doesn't work after, it burns out after a while.
He offers some terrible explanation.
So somehow
acetone.
That article is enough to save the Flash newspaper. Libby is fired from her job for reporting on this thing that actually turned out to be junk. And Mike, I guess, just walks back into the real world. He just walks away.
Well, he reconciles with, not to defend the film, but he reconciles with Brenda.
Well, that's after. Once he's back in the real world, he makes
No. First, they embrace. You know, he tells her that he fell in love with her over the course of the film.
Isn't that back at his drawing table?
No. This is
okay.
Not quite.
Oh no, he has an office. You're right. Yeah. He has an office at the He's got a job as like the
he wrote
artist?
himself in as having a job. It's not explained. Whatever. This plot, this framing plot is dumb. So like he tells her he fell in love with her, but that he's going back. She agrees to, they embrace. He wakes up back in the real world, and he starts painting her, drawing her with renewed enthusiasm, and she says, "I'll see you tomorrow." He draws a black orchid in her hands. She winks. Roll credits.
Yes.
Yep.
Okay.
And that's... Yeah.
Okay.
So, yeah. Okay, right. Let's do our...
All right, let's do it.
Yeah, let's do it.
Comic strip, I really enjoyed Brenda Starr. Yeah. Was not expecting to. I really thought it was going to be a Mary Worth type of deal. Was surprised by how wild the stories were.
That's right. Same. I completely agree. I was blown away by how kooky and camp the stories were when I opened up and read it. Yeah. Amazing. Very, very modern. So like Little Abner in that respect.
Yeah.
Not at all feeling like Skippy. Skippy feels like peering into another world.
Yeah. yeah. This is really, it's really well drawn. It's really well staged. The compositions are all really good. Like she really knew, especially by 47.
Yeah.
At the stage we were reading, she really was
great.
I'd running
like
on all cylinders.
More. Like Diabolique and Little Abner. I'd like to read more of these.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, movie.
You go first.
So I'm going to say nay.
Yeah.
Definitely, but it's not an entirely malicious nay. It's not like an completely angry nay. I think it's the parts that are crud are really crud, and not in an enjoyable way for me. Not the way some of the kookiness of the strip, where the plot lines are like at the end, like what was the deal with the designer and the model? Like how did this deal work? I kind of just let that flow over me. It was like a one Sunday, but to see a huge team of people try to attempt to make a thing that just fell apart like this did, if I'm being too vague. I don't know. It just didn't much. I guess I gave a nay to Flash Gordon as well.
I know you.
And I think I think Flash Gordon is better than this by far. I feel like the cheapness of it somehow hurt it. I think it could have been saved through editing. I think a better approach to the script. Take Brenda. Just do the Brenda stuff, as we've mentioned a few times. Just focus on the Brenda stuff. There's enough there. It's like they didn't have enough faith in the character, or that people would want to see a 1940s movie. We've got Indiana Jones movies are still coming out at this stage. Like it's really pretty soon after that cycle. Why are we afraid of doing a story that's set in the 40s?
Without a bloke in the present going back and being in a love triangle with... So, I'm going to vote yay.
Okay.
But I also agree with you on almost all points.
Okay, that's fair. I think that's totally fair.
I found this movie hilarious.
Yeah.
Especially the first half.
Yeah.
And I can just... And there's so many things I liked about it.
Yeah.
So many of the jokes landed for me, especially in the first half.
Okay.
Brooke Shields' performance is really good, I think.
Yeah, I agree. I think she's really good.
She looks fantastic. The costumes she wears are really great. On the other hand, the second half is not good.
Yeah.
The slapstick is offensive. And, as you say, the lack of confidence that led them to tacking on this overplot where you have this unlikable guy.
Yeah.
Completely unlikable, completely boring.
Yeah.
Male artist of a famously female written and drawn comic.
Yeah.
That's there. If that had been shorn off, if the slapstick had been yanked out, and if the second half of the film was as good as the first half, this would have been a classic, I think. Strong language, Kumar, but I stand by it.
I wouldn't go that far, but I think it would have made a more watchable movie, and maybe one that also maybe choose a better aspect ratio to shoot your film in or release
for a film
it in.
Where the Sheikh insisted one of his conditions for funding the film was that it be made for a theatrical release and not for a television release. Why
They
is
must
it in
have
4:3
shot it in widescreen and only released it on the video releases.
Well,
must have been.
There's a lot of
cropped.
mystery about what happened behind the scenes.
But I mean, yeah. It was weird because I was watching it, the framing, and it was really like everything was really center shot. I don't feel like anything was.
This could have been a really, really good TV movie.
Yes, that is very true, and I'm actually curious about that 1976 version now. After watching this.
All right, adaptation, yeah or nay?
I'm gonna go pretty hard nay on this, harder than the nay on the movie itself. I think, for all the reasons you mentioned, but also I don't feel like the character of Brenda is Brenda, and I think that's a really key thing. I feel like she's a bit too flighty.
Right.
Whereas I think Brenda in the comic is like, she's only flighty in the sense that she only cares about the story.
She's much more determined, yeah.
Yeah, and she's more likely to slap a dude in the face for being a jerk.
Yes. I agree. Yeah. Yes.
But, I mean, we've only read...
She's almost flinty in the comic. She's got a real monomaniacal determination.
Yes, yeah.
That's not... And whereas in the film, she's a little bit more almost ditzy.
Yeah, I think there were some moments, I don't know if I wrote them down, but it was really like she's distracted by her outfit or something.
Right.
It was just something that was not... That's not what the story's about, or... why did she let Mike kiss her in the truck? I don't get it. I didn't get the sense she was attracted to him.
No, because he's just designated love interest.
She didn't slap the hell out of him.
It's just bad writing.
And she's not... It's not like he's a love interest after that scene at all.
Because he was there, and of course... And the script said, kiss the guy. Because that's, really, really lame.
Yeah.
I'm also going to say adaptation nay. Even though some of the there's some overlap with some of the craziness, the kind of things that are really great about the comic that we read.
Yes.
Its gothic tone, its feminist message, feminist for the time.
Yeah.
I feel like that was absolutely not present in the film and undermined even by some of the choices they made, like having the character of Mike in it.
Yeah.
Well, before we go, Kumar,
Yeah.
I just want to quickly read a passage from something that Mary Schmidt,
Okay.
the author of Brenda Starr for the second phase of its existence, wrote in 2010, just before it finished, about the impact of the comic on her. She wrote, "Like most baby boomer kids, I grew up reading comics, and especially loved them on Sundays when the pictures were huge and the colour shrieked. Even as a 10-year-old, however, I noticed a problem. Dick Tracy, Steve Canyon, assorted guys in tights and masks. Why did the men get all the action? The few women who starred in their own strips were too ditzy for my taste, like Blondie, or too matronly, like Mary Worth, or just plain weird, like Nancy. But in this cosmos of tame women and hard-boiled heroes, one strip stood out, Brenda Starr, Reporter. Lying on my stomach on those long-gone Sundays, the comics spread out on the floor. I didn't consciously register Brenda Starr with her flame-red hair and twinkly eyes as a pioneer. I didn't know she was the invention of a woman, Delia Messick, who had changed her name to Dale because women couldn't get hired as comic strip writers. All I knew was that to me, a girl who yearned to live big in a big world, Brenda Starr blazed with possibility."
Amazing. Okay, shall we move on to next week's?
Yes.
All right, next week we're going to be talking about Bloodshot, starring Vin Diesel. I think it came out in 2022 or 2021.
Right, very recent.
It was a pandemic project for sure. I think it's full CG backgrounds. I think he shot it in his apartment maybe or something. I'm just making this up. I think it's heavy CG.
Tune in next week to find out.
Yeah. And based on the comic book from Valiant Comics from the 90s. But we'll go into all that kind of historical Valiant stuff as much as we need to next week.
Great.